Welcome back to our ongoing look at Capital Redefined. We're jumping right back in, hitting the final section of Chapter 5. And this is where the authors really unpack a pretty radical idea about how our own creativity gets turned into labor way before anyone ever talks about a salary.
Okay, so let's just start with a question that seems super simple on the surface, but it's actually incredibly deep. We all know capital buys and sells labor, right? But where does that labor even come from? What has to happen for our creative energy, our actions, to become this thing that can be put on a market and sold?
So to really figure this out, we have to rewind. We've got to look at what happens long before a wage is ever paid. This is kind of like the secret origin story of labor itself, before it even steps foot in a factory or logs into an office computer.
Now, most of the time when we talk about this, we're talking about something the authors call secondary abstraction. This should sound pretty familiar. It's the process where all the wildly different kinds of work people do, writing code, baking bread, driving a truck, all get kind of squashed and made equal by the market so they can be compared and given a price tag.
But here's the big twist. The authors are saying that's only the second step. That's not the real beginning of the story. The real action, they argue, happens on a much deeper, more fundamental level, before the market even enters the picture.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. So you have that secondary abstraction, which happens inside the system through market exchange. But then there's this other thing, primary abstraction. And this is the moment our shared human creativity itself gets turned into the very idea of labor. It's the thing that has to happen first, the precondition that makes the whole game possible.
To put it simply, this is the magic trick, right? It's where our innate shared ability to create stuff is basically captured, packaged up, and turned into an object. Think about it like this. Our creativity is a flowing river. Primary abstraction is the process of building a bottling plant on its banks, capturing that water and sealing it in little plastic bottles called labor power. Only then can it be shipped to market.
So what's the engine running that bottling plant? What's the mechanism that's actually doing the capturing? Well, the authors have a name for it: decommonization.
And this, right here, is the core idea. The logic of capital isn't just about what happens in markets. It's about a systematic process of separation. It's about taking things that we all share, things that belong to everyone or maybe to no one, like clean air or community knowledge, or even our own creative potential, and chopping them up into private, separate bits and pieces. And what this quote gets at is that this isn't some one-time event, like putting up a fence around a field centuries ago. Nope. It's a cycle that feeds itself. A society built on separation just keeps producing more separation, and that's what keeps the whole system going, no matter what it looks like on the surface.
Okay, so how does this decommonization actually work? I mean, what does it look like in practice? The authors say it systematically attacks four fundamental parts of our lives, what they call the four commons. Let's walk through each one.
So the basic framework is this. Capital takes what makes for a truly good life, what the authors call true value, and it twists it, it perverts it into something that only serves the goal of accumulation. They call this fetish value. So let's see how this plays out across those four commons.
First up, our shared creativity. In its natural, common state, it's this active, dynamic force that lets us make and do amazing things. But then it gets decommonized, it gets walled off, and turned into this passive thing, abstract labor, just a resource, an input to be plugged into the machine.
Next, you have livability. This is our deep connection to the living world around us. But that gets decommodified, and suddenly the living world becomes natural resources. It gets turned into a grid of assets to be extracted, used up, and sold off.
Third is conviviality. All those communal bonds, the relationships of care and solidarity that make a community. That gets replaced by the cold, alienating logic of private exchange. Our social interactions become transactions, all mediated by barcodes and price tags.
And finally, there's alterity. This is our incredible shared power to imagine and build totally different futures. But this gets warped into a narrow instrumentalism, where the only goal is to just keep the current system going. The future is no longer an open question, it's just more of the same, endlessly reproduced.
So, when you put all four of those transformations together, you end up with a whole new way of looking at how capital grows. It's not just about what happens at the point of production, it's much bigger than that.
So here's the chain of events they lay out. And notice what comes first. It all starts with decommonizing those four sources: our creativity, our planet, our communities, and our futures. That's what makes primary abstraction possible, turning creativity into labor.
And only then, at the very end of the chain, can you have secondary abstraction, where that labor gets sold on the market. The result is what they call accumulation by decommonization.
And this really reframes the whole conversation. You might be familiar with the idea of accumulation by dispossession. Basically, capital accumulating wealth by taking things, like land or resources. But what's being argued here is that the process is so much deeper. It's not just about taking stuff from us, it's about fundamentally changing how we exist in the world.
This quote really nails it. Once capital's logic has completely saturated our reality, the very act of abstracting our creativity, of turning it into that labor thing, is the exploitation. The two processes basically merge into one. They become almost impossible to tell apart.
All right, so after all of that, what's the big takeaway? What does this completely different story about where labor comes from actually mean for us, looking forward?
Well, the authors argue that if we want a truly different kind of future, it's not enough to just focus on abolishing wage exploitation at work. The real, fundamental project has to be what they call recommoning. It means actively rebuilding and restoring our connections to our shared creativity, to our planet, to each other, and to our power to imagine and create a new world. And that leaves us with a huge question, right? Now that we have this whole framework, how does it stack up against other major theories of late capitalism? How does it challenge them? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into next time as we dive into Chapter 6. See you then.